Webex this morning. All right, so we are being recorded, and welcome to our Webex today on April 24th, 2013, a wonderful snowy April for everybody this
Sam?
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I'd just much rather get the knowledge of what feedlots are out there versus, you know what I mean?
nothing happened.
Can anybody hear me? This is Ben.
Yep, Ben.
We're still waiting for Sam to get on.
Yep.
I can't hear you, Ben.
Oh, okay.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
I hear you.
Hey, are we having technical difficulties?
Yapper.
Where's Sam? Anybody know where Sam is?
She was on earlier, but I don't know what happened to her.
She's tied up in the technical difficulties, guys.
Say we probably got time for Ole and Lena jokes then.
Oh, thank you, Jerry, for keeping everybody entertained while I was struggling.
I was about to take over. Thank goodness you got on there when you did.
Oh, I apologize. It freaked out and it wouldn't let me unmute my line. So don't click the mute button more than once. It kind of does not like that. I learned a very valuable lesson this morning. So I'm back, and I apologize for this bizarre delay this morning. So we're welcoming everybody to Webex for April 24th. I already said that. If you heard me before, Jerry had a few good jokes, it sounds like, while I was gone.
I didn't get time to get them in.
You didn't get time to get them in. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
All right. Oh, so we have a speaker here with us today. Many of you probably have met Randy Pepin at some point in time in your careers, but he's with the University of Minnesota Extension. He has been out of Long Prairie and I think over in Morrison County and maybe some other counties. Maybe Randy can fill us in on that. Well, he's going to be talking to us a little bit about the grid soil sampling, and this is a workshop that he has been giving around the counties a little bit, so you may have heard it already, but I think it's still very beneficial, and hopefully we'll have some good discussion today. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Randy and give him an opportunity to maybe give a little introduction himself and a little background on what he is going to be talking to us about.
Okay. Try to get the right monitor here. Is that the right one?
Yep, we can see your background. No PowerPoint yet. There it is.
Got it. You see it?
Beautiful. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know some of you attended the workshops. So it'll be some review, but maybe not entirely. But what I did this last fall and winter is finish up a project that was started a couple years ago on the concept of using grid soil sampling as a method of knowing where to distribute manure better. So that's what I've been doing. I guess my background is production ag with livestock, mostly dairy, but quite a bit of swine through the years. And this has been interesting, and as we finish this project, I'm moving to the next one. But that's where I'm at. Anything else you want to cover before we start, Sam?
No, I guess, how many times have you given this presentation now? Is it like 3?
Oh, no. Depending, because I gave it some other venues too, 15, 16 times.
Oh, wow.
Plus I've taken it up and it's split up into some small mini parts, and it's going to be put onto the University of Minnesota website, 2 but broken up into about 6 different parts so people can view one section or the other. So that's been completed. They're just doing the stuff down in St. Paul to get it put up there on the web. So I've been through this a number of times. Across the state, mostly in the belt from the Stearns County down to the southeastern part of the state, but also over in the southwestern part of the state too, and other areas. So a number of different areas, and a lot of livestock producers, but also CFOs and NRCS and soil and water and independent consultants, and so a lot of different types of people come in, and it's been interesting getting around the state and hearing different things. That people have different ways of doing things. But anyway, let's just get started here quickly. That's who I am. The technical support was, many of you probably know, Les and Jose. That's the background. Technical support was done before I got on board, and this project was funded by the McKnight Foundation. Just a real quick thing that just to make sure we're all on the same page. I always just want to make sure that people understand the difference between the composite and the grid. Typical, what we've been doing for years and years is wandering through a field with the four-wheel or whatever and grabbing a bunch of cores and putting that together is what we call the composite, and the grid is where we divide it up. Typically, they're about 2.5 acres. Typical. If you're going to use them for manure, you want to do at least your basic test where you get phosphorus and potassium. Some people have done some sulfur and zinc testing besides, and some value in that. There's the cost of doing this. For this case study, we're using 10 1/4 per acre, which in visiting with everybody, this seemed like the range ran somewhere between 9 and 12. So everybody seemed pretty comfortable. That's a decent cost. So when we're doing comparisons, we know where we're at. And everybody's probably seen this to get some sort of a map back for each nutrient. And you can do some mapping with that. And of course, these can be put into GPS systems for commercial fertilizer. What I want to do here just quickly, because this question came up a few times, there's another concept out there called zone sampling, where you look at the soil mapping, and instead of doing it in the exact 2.5 acre grid, maybe in this case you would do one sample over here in this zone 4, and you would probably do, instead of doing a whole bunch of grids, you do it by zones. And I think the biggest thing about this is people are trying to use this to get people to start doing sampling and to save them some money. As I get around and talk to various people who have been doing it, large crop farmers in the southern part of the state, that the majority of their grid sampling is with the crops where they have some manure coming on, and to other farmers on the other side of the spectrum, they're not too sure they're ready to go to this yet. So and then the other real thing that I want to consider is when a field has a history of manure application, it really changes this thing immensely. And so using this concept of grid sampling, or zone sampling, when there's a manure history on a field, I think the results are going to be very disappointing. And so the grid sampling would be a lot. And also, many times farms have combined smaller fields, and then they have a whole complete different cropping history, and that can really change things too. So even though the zone might have some validity, I'm not too sure that most of your cases where you're dealing with manure that it would apply very well. Anybody have a different opinion on that? Whoops, what happened there? That slide pulled I pulled my audio up from that slide that I pulled in. Why bother good soil sampling? We'll go to real quick. We'll go to this slide real quick. Basically, let's get out of that. Economics is a real driving factor behind this in most cases. I kind of like this slide as this illustrates how not to spread manure and why you need good spreaders and calibration, and of course the other side of the field didn't get any, and getting any type of positive results. All this is going to be tough. So let's move right into the first case, because this was based on a series of 8 different case studies, and they're all posted on the University of Minnesota Manure website. So that was the crux of what we did as we presented this. So this is a 276-acre field. This is the building site. With this crowd, I think you're all pretty familiar with what you might expect surrounding the building site. This is fairly hilly field, of course. This apparently is a woods down here, not a sensitive area, but in some cases that could be a sensitive area. The composite soil test of this field was a 27 parts per million Bray and 225 parts per million potassium. So typically, with this type of soil test, you would not need any phosphorus or potassium on this field, and so this is what a map would look like. The whole thing is green. You won't need any phosphorus on this field, and that's been traditional what we've done through the years. This field was gridded, and here is just to highlight each one of these dots as a center point of each one of the cells of the grid. Here is the results of this grid. You may have seen some good results, and what I'm getting around the state and visiting with a lot of people, everybody's pretty comfortable that this is pretty typical. You see high degree of variability in these fields. As I alluded to, here's the building site, and our phosphorus levels are quite high there, and the potassium levels are high in the whole field, but they're even higher surrounding the building site. So that's where we want to start. This is a hog farm, of course. We have 1 million gallons of liquid manure. Here's our nitrogen components and our phosphorus and potassium. So what we talked about through this process is that we have, on a given field, we have 4 scenarios. One scenario is that we could just, you'd probably be the scenario you would use if you didn't grid sample. You're just going to put your manure across the whole field based upon the nitrogen needs of the corn crop. So we're just covering the whole field with manure.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
We do it once a month.
Okay.
Someone is
and
talking behind.
Please mute your line if you're not the speaker.
All right, go ahead, Randy. Keep going.
Okay. And then the second option would be to put your manure on for the phosphorus needs for the whole field. Well, in this case, if you remember, the composite result was 27. So that's not a scenario that's valid for this field, because there's no need for any phosphorus on a composite soil test for this field. But, there is a nitrogen need for corn. Okay, but then as you look here, you see this outline here. What we did is we took and said, okay, this area of the field we don't have this phosphorus need, but out here we do. I mean, there's for decent corn production, there's some pretty low areas out here. So we could put the manure out in this area out here, either on the nitrogen need or the phosphorus need out in this area. And it's 2 different ways of thinking about how we're going to do that, but we're getting it out there. I guess it's something to think about is your working with farmers and their manure management plans. Is somebody ran a composite test, which is very typical, and you get it 27. Maybe that's not so high, but maybe the test is 70 or 80 or 110, 120 or something like that on the composite test. If they do a grid, you might find that yeah, you'll have some really high results in some areas of the field, but some areas of the field are low. I mean, so it's two parts. One, of course, for helping that farmer maximize his production for his crop, but you might have an area out here that's low that really could use some phosphorus, but it might be near a sensitive area, and based upon the composite sample, you wouldn't even be allowed to put any down there. But with the grid, it could be in needing phosphorus, and if you went out there and incorporated it right away, you could put some manure out there. So that's just some of the thought process of the validity of using grid sampling for these livestock farmers. So that zonal area that we call it, the area outside that needed to test, that has of course, a need of 160 pounds of nitrogen for the corn, but it has a need of 45 pounds an acre for the phosphorus. It was pretty high in potassium, so we didn't have the potassium need out there. It's not alfalfa is not in rotation, so we're not pulling a lot of potassium. So what we do with this particular farm is 276 acres, in this case with 3,000 gallons of that liquid swine manure will take care of the nitrogen needs for that field. And actually we have a little bit left over. We don't need the full 1 million gallons for this field. We have remember the second scenario was N-base for the whole field, and we determined that wasn't a valid option for this field. But if we look at the N-base for the zoned area, that happens to be 209 acres, and at the same 3,000 gallons per acre, we get that covered. And then we have about roughly a third of the manure left over. And if we take that same zonal area, the same 209 acres, but we put it on for the phosphorus needs, then we only need 2,000 gallons an acre, and we have actually over half of it left over. This was an interesting topic in the workshops. Interesting question, because is this good or bad? And depending on where you are, I mean, in some parts of the state, there's some people that have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 acres of land and a couple of hog finishing buildings. For them, it's great, because then they can take this manure and go to another part of their farm and get some maximum value out of it. But in a lot of our areas of the state where we have some pretty intense livestock operations right next to each other, it becomes a real challenge, because they're don't have any other place to go on their own farm, and maybe they don't have neighbors that are willing to buy it because they have enough of their own manure. So, this becomes a challenge in some situations, and of course that's what a lot of this is about. Economics. If we look at the whole, putting N based on the whole field, we get a pretty good return. I mean, it's a 200 some acre field, and for the value of manure applied, we're getting a pretty good return. This year, actually, we shouldn't even be putting this on here, but never, because that would have been a composite test. But anyway, over here, when we look at the zonal area, we're getting a good return of 22,000 minus the cost of grid sampling. So we discovered where we need it and where we don't. So we got a return of 19,000. But remember, we had about a third of the manure left over. And over here on the third scenario, where we put it on that area based upon phosphorus, it shows a lower return. But again, we had over half of the manure left over. So if we could find another field that needed this manure, our return is going to be over 30,000. So it's
Hey,
a pretty
Randy?
good return. Yeah.
Would you be able to cover maybe the difference between the nitrogen-based whole field and the nitrogen-based zonal? Again, there's a question that came up that they're both 3,000 gallons per acre, but it shows that there's more manure left. So maybe cover that again, just to highlight.
Let's go back there. Let's go back, because what we did, we determined that this is our zonal area. An area that we can put manure on where there's some phosphorus needs out here, whereas this area right here area levels are very high. So this is what we're calling our, again, the whole field is we're applying manure across the whole field like we've been doing typically through the years. And now because we grid sampled this field, we determined, okay, we're just going to put it on this zone. So that's where we're coming up with this difference. Let's go back here. So it's a 276 acre field, so the end-based whole field, we put the manure across the whole field at 3,000. Here we put it at 3,000 just on 209 acres. That's where we come up with having more left over because we didn't cover as many acres. And here we put it on the phosphorus needs, and the phosphorus needs only dictated 2,000 gallons an acre instead of the 3, and that's why we had quite a bit more left. Does that help answer that?
Yeah, you said, so we followed up with another question. So no manure is applied in the high P areas. So they're avoiding the high phosphorus areas for manure application.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we're looking at there.
So in those areas, they're just putting in commercial nitrogen.
That would be the case. There's two parts to it. There's the environment, of course, but then there's also the economics. Is that they're going to get a much poorer return of their manure when the only thing you're getting out of it is nitrogen. If you can put it into the areas of the fields that you can get the value of all three, NP and K, or at least two of them, the economic return to the farmer is much better, and of course the environment. And that's going to be this. That's what this slide illustrates. Is that when we can put it on this zonal area over here, we get a much. It does, again, this doesn't look as much as it is, but again, we have more manure left here. And over here, we have, again, over half of the manure left over. So our total return over here, again, could be over 30,000 if this other manure is put onto another field that needs these nutrients.
So there's one more question. Yeah, I think so. I haven't seen anything else come up. The other question that just came through was, why isn't there phosphorus needs for the whole field and P equals 45 on the others? I'm not quite sure if I understand that question. Do you know what does that make sense?
Well, the whole field, the average composite test on this whole field is 27. So that's what we're trying to isolate here, the difference between the traditional is of sampling, where you just you go across this whole field and you randomly take a dozen soil samples and then get a composite back, and then you base your decisions on that one soil sample lab result for the whole field. In this case, it would be 27, versus where we have these grid results where we have a soil test from the lab on each one of these dots. So that's what we're trying to get at here, is a difference. So down here, what we did then is that zonal area. This is the average of all the soil tests in that zonal area. The 15 part per million Bray, which tells us that in that zonal area we need 45. Did that help that?
Okay. Yeah, he said okay, so.
Okay. No, it's important because there's another part here we talk about the economics. I can show this later, but where these numbers come from, on a University of Minnesota Manure website, there's a link to a spreadsheet. It's a pretty extensive spreadsheet, and I find that quite a few people have been using this, where you put in the value of commercial fertilizer, the nutrient analysis that you have, and the crop you're putting in, and anyway, you go through this process and you can come up with a value of the manure. And of course, if you don't need the nutrients, there's no value, no economic value put on it at that point. So that's where you lose the value of the manure when you don't need it for phosphorus. So, okay. This is another case study that we went through in depth. This one happens to be a dairy farm. Kind of hilly. You see a bunch of contour strips here. Dairy field, I should say. In this particular case, the whole field tested an average of 36 was a composite test and 171 potassium. So in this particular scenario, we wouldn't need any phosphorus or potassium on this field based upon a traditional composite soil test. Just to illustrate that, because that's what you see. The whole field is 36. But again, here's our grid sample. No, the farm site is over here. This is where the building site is, and it makes sense. Here's where our high phosphorus levels are again. I had one farmer, we were talking about this, and one farmer at one site was saying, well, because he's a farmer that had quite a few acres and his fields were going across where years ago used to be farm sites. And he said, well, with the grid sample, you can tell where all the farm sites used to be. so it hangs around for a while, and it changes the soil test immensely. But anyway, what we see over here, and you can already see the line that we're looking at, is that we're going to propose that this is the area of the field that needs the manure, and we need both phosphorus and over here potassium in that area of the field, and over here we're pretty good. So that's what we're going to look at in this particular field. In this field we have a little different. In this particular case we had 1,000 tons of Penpack manure. Here's our analysis. It was a 224-acre field. This is a silage grain soybean rotation and the typical box spreader and yield. So we look at the same scenarios that we look at on the hog farm, where we have one scenario. If all we had was a composite test, we would just potentially put manure across this whole field based upon the nitrogen needs. Phosphorus needs whole field. Well, it was 36, so that we don't need anything based upon our composite test. But if we grid sample, now we can look at our zonal area over here. This area over here, we're going to either put the manure on based upon nitrogen needs or phosphorus needs of this area. If we took that zonal area, it gives us a 15 parts per million Bray and a 45 pounds per acre need of phosphorus in that area. And we do have in that zone area, there's some potassium needs too. So this is similar to what we looked at the last time. Now what's a little bit different in this scenario is that in order to get our nitrogen needs covered, we need to put on 20 ton an acre of the manure. And of course that only allows us to cover 50 acres. And why is this low? I mean, I guess partly because of the method of application. We weren't able to capture as much of the nitrogen as in some of the other scenarios, but we'll cover a little bit that a little bit later. But it's pretty important. In this case, we're trying to get enough manure on to take care of the nitrogen. So the question that's posed in this scenario is that if you've never grid sampled and all you have is your composite sample, and you have manure to cover 50 acres, you got a 224-acre field, what part of the field gets the manure? And in most cases, some farmers think ahead a little bit and start thinking, well, I haven't been putting manure there. But traditionally, through time, I mean, manure has always gone on the acres closest to the building. It just keeps happening. And hopefully there's less of that now, but it's what has happened through the years. So that's the question here. Over here, we look at the zonal area, the part that was on the right side of the map. And there's 89 acres in that zonal area. So the 50, we can cover almost all of that, not quite all of that with when we put the manure based upon a nitrogen need. What if we put the manure on based upon the phosphorus need? Then we only need 11 ton an acre. And could have a little bit of manure left over. We could probably put it on a 12 or 13 ton and cover the whole strip. But anyway, that's what we're looking at over there. The economics are a little bit different in this scenario. When we're only getting the nitrogen out of it, and we have to put on the full 20 ton, we're not extrapolating a lot of value out of that manure. But when we go over to, when we can at least put it on that zonal area that needs NP and K, we get pretty good value. And actually, it's a different type of manure source than we were looking at with hogs. But nevertheless, even with the cost of $2,300 of grid sampling, and that's the one-time cost, and typically you do that for 4 years, we're still getting a 2-to-1 return in this one time by doing the grid sampling. And when we put it on that area based upon the phosphorus, it's a 3-to-1 return. Any questions on that? Or?
Yeah, there's another question that came up. For the return on manure, nitrogen-based zonal, what value is given to the extra manure or the leftover manure? Is that,
well, that would be, I guess that would kind of depend on the next field. If you have the extra manure, the spreadsheet bases the value on, of course, commercial fertilizer and also the needs of the field, is what the spreadsheet does. If you have a field that needs everything, of course, and I have another couple slides here a little bit later that illustrates that pretty good with these, where if you needed everything, what the value of that manure would be. So it's going to vary with the situation. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. Just a couple quick things here, and I think you probably have seen this before, but this is a relative needs of NP and K with corn, but here's a relative of what dairy manure looks like. They don't overlay very well, so when we continually to put manure on for nitrogen needs, we just have excess of P and K. If it's a dairy farm and they're putting a lot of alfalfa in their rotation, we'll end up using most of this potassium for the alfalfa. But the alfalfa's got about the same requirement as corn, so it's this phosphorus thing that gets us in trouble. For determining nitrogen rates with manure, University is simplified it quite a bit. Are you following corn or are you following beans? Now we're looking at high productive and medium productive soils, and you just pull a N requirement out of here. But this is a grid that I think most of you understand the concept very well because you deal with it all the time.
No, I don't.
You do it. If something is not incorporated or incorporated in a few hours or right away or injected, the manure source, we get much more out of our nitrogen. And of course it's different for each species, but nevertheless it goes up as we do a better job. But I wanted to draw attention to also is the second year on each one of these species. There's a second year credit, and that's something that a lot of people don't account for, at least when they think about it. When you do your manure management plans, the spreadsheet does that for you, but the farmers in their thought process don't always think about that, and that's there. In the workshops are always a two-way interactive thing, so I always challenge them, why is this? And of course it's the organic matter that this nitrogen is tied up in it. See, it doesn't really matter how you put it on, it's just about the same amount that's left over the next year, because it takes about a year for that nitrogen to break up.
Hey, Randy,
So
do you find that the producers are aware of this? I mean, do they realize the differences, or is this new to them?
It varied, but I'd say that by far, and the ones that come to these workshops, of course, are usually people that are pretty on top of things, but quite a few of them were not aware of this. I think it's something that, like I say, even though if they're doing a nutrient management plan, they maybe don't understand what that spreadsheet is doing for them. because it's in there. But yeah, they don't, when they're doing their spot process, they're not going in thinking, well, when I put all this manure on this year, I don't have to put quite as much nitrogen on next year. They don't think about that. I think that's pretty common.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else there? This
I don't
is
have
available
anything
on.
else.
This is available on the university website and also in none of the publications. But I think it's a pretty good table to be familiar with. This is something that is indirect with manure, but I think it's pretty important. And this is something also that a lot of farmers either don't believe or whatever. If you have a good alfalfa stand with 4 or greater plants per square foot, the current recommendations are that when we plow that down, there's 150 pounds of N available for that first year's corn crop. Well, that's pretty much, we're looking at 160 or so as a need. So with a little bit of starter, we don't really need. But what do most of these dairy farmers do when they plow up alfalfa field? So many of them do. The first thing you do is put manure out there. And there's 2 parts to it. One is economics. They're not taking advantage of what they already have, and secondly is, not really efficiently using nitrogen, which is an environmental issue besides. So I think there's some new research coming on this. Dr. Jeff Coulter is doing pretty extensive research on alfalfa credits, and he's going to, by fall or so, we should have probably some more up-to-date information, because we're finding that there's some variability with this, and and depending on the type of soil and the rainfall and things like that, this can vary a little bit. But in most situations, the credits are there, but there's sometimes where you lose some, and this what they're working on is going to give us a better management. And that's probably what's happened, is maybe there's been a time or two where a farmer thought this was here, and then due to the type of soil and rainfall, maybe he lost. Because this nitrogen, when you plow it down, you can lose it just like if you put down fertilizer. So it's not like it's real stable.
Randy, I have a question regarding that.
Yeah.
Do they have an economic value? I mean, the whole green manure kind of thing. If you plant alfalfa and you harvest it for 2 years and then plow it down, and say you've got your 4 plants or greater, is there any economics in rotating it that quickly through instead of getting your 3rd, 4th year out of them?
There actually, I don't have an answer for you right now, although that in due respect that they are working through that. There's been discussions on that issue of that probably stands down sooner and get that value. Many farmers don't want to do that. They go on the other end and wait till the stand looks weak before they plow her down, because I think they're thinking about the cost of putting in the next year's alfalfa crop. But I think that's a good question, and there's a little bit more work as far as getting those values in there that we need. But I think that's a very valid question that some people could be considering. Another question that came up a lot on this is, how about we have these 12, 18-inch plants? Are we better off plowing down these tall plants and using what we call green manure, or we're better off taking the stand, harvesting it? And actually, with Jeff's work, there's not as much additional value to that vegetative growth on the top as we might think. I mean, it's not that there isn't any value, there is some, but that crop is worth so much economically that you really can't afford to plow all this tall stuff down. You're far better off harvesting it economically. And these numbers that you see on the screen here, those numbers are attained from without the green on the top. This is not only the roots, but you don't get these with a plant. If you plant it this fall or this spring and then you plow it up right away, you won't have these credits. It needs to have a full season of growth, which is usually going to be, in most cases, going to be 2 years of being out in the field before you build this up, and the nitrogen gets into the part of the roots, because it's always putting on new roots, and some of the old roots get cut off and they have nitrogen in it, and so it's a lot of things happening down there to give us these credits. But it is the soil and the root system that gives it. Anything else on that? Okay. This is a chart on the phosphorus guidelines. I'm not going to go to all. There's one of these, phosphorus and potassium for all the major crops. We're not going to go into that. I just wanted to do this one because to show what they are, and it's on the phosphorus. If our Brayer Olsen tests are quite low, we have a pretty high phosphorus need, very high phosphorus need. But on the other hand, what you guys are going to run into more often than that is that when we get over 21 Bray or 16 Olsen, we don't have any broadcast need, and any need is going to be primarily in the starter. This red line down here is interesting. This low phosphate further is recommended if it's over 25, and as I get around the state, most farmers are using some starter fertilizer. But the question is it okay if we have a 50 or 100 or more Bray and it's a cool spring, do we still need phosphorus in the starter? And we do not have the research answer for that. We're just guessing, and it's nice to have some answers there. But anyway, I guess what I really want to show is that 21 Bray is where you want to. Once you get over that, we don't have a need for any phosphorus other than the starter. And this is just a chart showing the same thing, a return of yield. Once you get past 21, this isn't there. So a summation of this thing is that our nitrogen needs varies by the species and how we apply it. But on the other side, on the phosphorus, regardless of what species of manure came from and how you put it down, or if you incorporate it or not, about 80% of that is going to be available the first year to the crops. And the potassium, the same scenario, 90% the first year. So we don't have near the, as we know, these two elements aren't volatile like nitrogen, and they don't leach like nitrogen, and we have a pretty good availability. So, I'm sorry. But that slide wanted to illustrate is that once we get over 21 parts per million, that we really didn't need any phosphorus. This is just a slide on the value of doing soil tests, book value of, in this case, dairy and swine, and this is just another thing of some bunch of average soil tests that I got together. But look at the variance, the wide range we have, and of course, as people are in nutrient management plans, they're required to test, and this is why, because these tests are literally all over the place, and without testing, if you're just going to use on book values, you can be way off. So, recognizing the value of the manure, we're not just. I guess I don't want to bring in that we know that commercial fertilizer has gone up a lot in price. This is a snapshot of the University of Minnesota website. You go right down here. This is a link to all of these case studies will be down there, and an explanation with that. And right here in the application, you can find the links to the value. And there's 3 different ways you can go through that. One, you can do it right on the web. It'll give you a return, except that when you leave that website, you lose your numbers. The second option is actually downloading a spreadsheet, and I like that the best because then you can keep that for future reference and whatever. And the third method is just printing off a PDF form. So here's one of the pages where you type in your initial value, and you go through 3-4 pages and come up with your economic return. What I wanted to show here is just because it illustrates what we were just talking about on that first hog farm. If we had a field, or first in that particular case, we had a value of $72 an acre or $24 per 1,000 gallons. But if we found a field that needed everything, the full value of that manure is $194 an acre or $65 per 1,000 gallons. So the difference between real life scenario where we didn't need quite everything and the total value of that manure based on the NP and K.
Hold on. Say that again, Randy. This side's a little.
Okay.
Say that again.
Okay. These are the numbers that these are the numbers we use in the case study because that's using that spreadsheet. That's based upon what that field needs. That's the value of the manure.
Okay.
This down here, whoops. This down here is the total value of the NP and K of that manure. So if we found a field that needed not only all the nitrogen for corn, but the phosphorus test was 15 and the potash was 100, we can put that manure on and get full value of that manure.
Oh, okay.
So that's what that spreadsheet does for you. It's going to give you a value based upon your needs. I mean, you can manipulate the numbers, but and you see where this comes out. I mean, it's just to help you decide what the value of the manure is. And the same thing with that dairy. If you remember that it was only $4 an acre or 20 cents a ton for that dairy manure because of the type of manure we had. But if we had a field that needed everything, so we put it on a 20.8 ton an acre, that's going to give us all the nitrogen needs we have, plus the phosphorus and potassium, is instead of $4 an acre, 149 an acre, 20 cents a ton up to 7. So the value of the manure is quite high if we can put it on places that really need the manure. Any questions on that? Okay.
Dairy manure
now
one. I have a question on the dairy manure one. Is that the full value? Is that assuming that you tilled it in right away or knifed it in instead of the way that
this is assuming. Well, actually, yeah, it's assuming incorporating right away. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, anything else? What I have left here, and Sam, do you want to go in this? What I have here is some other case studies where we just got a couple slides. We don't have the full bull and long thing, just a short thing on the case studies.
Yeah.
Did you want to? Okay. So in this particular case is a dairy farm, 1 3/4 million gallons of liquid slurry. Here's our analysis. Here's our field. It's a 95-acre field. Here's a more typical dairy rotation with 4 years alfalfa, 4 years corn silage. The composite test of this field is 27 parts million Bray, 84 potassium. So, yeah.
That's okay. I think someone's talking. Just keep going.
Okay. So anyway, based upon this information on the composite test, we don't need any phosphorus on the field, but we do need some potassium. And of course, nitrogen, I suppose. This is the dairy site up here. I'm sorry, it's not the dairy. The dairy site, this is not the dairy site. The dairy site is down here. That's one thing I haven't been on this farm, but I mean the rest of the site was. Anyway, here's the result of the grid sample. And close to the site, we have these high phosphorus levels. And on the far side, we have some phosphorus needs. And we actually have some potassium needs across the whole field, but here's where we have the greatest potassium need over here. In this particular case, we went through the concept, okay, let's just put the manure over here. This zonal area here was a 15 parts per million Bray, and we apply the manure over here. If you want to look at the economics, I don't have that on this slide set. That's on the website, but it, you know, it is a decent return by putting it on that way. Here's another site. Here's a hog farm. This is a 157 acre field. This is the farm site, corn bean rotation. The composite test is a 33 part per million Bray and 194 potassium. So again, we don't need any P or K on this field based upon our composite soil test. Here's the grid results. A little bit difficult, but it's obviously closer to the farm site. We got all our high phosphorus levels from the presumably higher, more manure getting spread over there through the years, and we have some phosphorus needs out and around here. This is a beef farm, 189 acre field, beans, corn with a slinger spreader. The test was 50 parts per million Bray and 227 potassium. Again, we don't need any P or K in this field. This is the farmyard going up here with that dark area. That's not part of the field. And down here, this is the livestock site. In this particular case, we really don't need any phosphorus anywhere, as you can see. So what we did in the case study here is something that you run into quite a bit is, okay, let's just, in this particular case, let's put the manure over here based on phosphorus removal rates. We're not getting a return, phosphorus return, but at least you're putting manure where there's less phosphorus than across the whole field. So that's how this one was approached. And the economics of that, again, are on the internet. Here's the situation, 50 acre field, corn, alfalfa, and the composite was 26 to 121. So again, we don't need any phosphorus, but there is a potassium need here. A little bit hilly, here's down the middle. And here's our grid. The livestock facility was here. I mean, look at this. We got all this phosphorus out here in the further out. And they apparently through the years didn't get much manure on these further out parts of the field. So there's a pretty high need out there. This farmer is buying poultry manure, so the economic return to buying the manure and putting out in those far out points is quite high. So any questions on those quick runs? Those four. I don't have much else. Basically, you know, conservation tillage. You people see all that, the value of that, and working with kind of not have as much phosphorus build up. My next project is going to be working on phosphorus import and exports in a livestock system, and we need phosphorus. Phosphorus is necessary for plants and animals. It's just that if we can figure out a way to bring less in and still meet their needs, we don't get as much phosphorus into the system. So I'll be working on that for the next couple of years. There, that's what I have as far as the presentation itself. Any other questions? We can back up if you wish, or whatever you want.
A question just came in. Said, did the example with the high phosphorus have any special protection areas? Was that taken, you know, you said that would be a concern, but when you guys did the field studies, was that something that was taken into consideration? You're looking at some of the special protection areas as well?
I didn't have the privilege. I was not on these farms.
Okay.
This was done before I started, so I can't answer what. Let's go back. Let's go back here. I can't answer that because I don't know the answer. If there's, here's a farmyard, so we're probably okay there. But I don't know what's out beyond here. I can't answer that.
Okay.
But it's a good question because yeah, you certainly want to consider that. I would assume, in the way this was presented, that it was okay. But yeah, if you're dealing with phosphorus levels like this, and you've got ditches and all kinds of things, you may not want to do that.
Okay. Any other questions out there for Randy that you guys would like to ask about the grid sampling, zones, any of the projects? Feel free to chat or just speak up.
Oh, there's one thing I wanted to show in this one farm. Right here. Look right here. You got 282 and 951. And confirming, it was my suspicion, and confirming that those were stockpile, as a stockpile area, the former stockpile area. So, and I don't know how many years it was stockpiled there, but anyway, the levels got quite high. And that area is down in here right next to the facility, so they stockpiled near it. But it is interesting seeing what can happen.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting where the stockpile is, that you can pinpoint it.
Yeah, and some of the farmers
move it every year.
Some of the farmers that had grid sample that came to workshops indicated that they've seen that former stockpile area. Maybe not quite that high, but higher than the surrounding area. So yeah, the good reason to move it around.
Well, and they're required to by rule, so that's even a better reason. For me, at least, right?
Well, yeah. And it's just, thinking through. I don't think in the past a lot of people or a lot of farmers just thought about these things a whole lot. You just go out and spread the manure and just
do their job. Yep. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we will just thank you, Randy, very much for coming in and presenting this to us, and appreciate your willingness to do that and answer our questions today.
No, I enjoy it. It's spent quite a bit of time doing this, and I've met some of you, and anything comes up, just let me know. Thanks for everything.
No problem. You're welcome to stay on if you want to, or you can jump off. That's entirely up to you.
Okay, thank you much.
We're going to talk about, thank you. All right. Well, it's about 11:06, and I think we're going to touch on a couple Delta items before we let you guys go from the Webex today. Steve, are you out there with us today?
Yep. Yeah, I am, Sam.
Okay. All right. Would you like to jump off with Delta stuff?
You want to switch control to me, or do you want to just...
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I will hand it over, and we will let Steve take her away.
And let's see here. I want monitor 1 and...
All right, Delta.
Delta. Okay. Just a couple of quick things. In Delta, we've done some updating. Can everybody see my screen? I'm going to just bring up an inspection screen to start with. I want to go through a couple things on the inspection screen that have changed, and we're working on some guidance documents. But in the inspection type, you will see that we have added a category called emergency response. That is specifically for manure spills, fires, tornadoes, floods, anything that would constitute an emergency response. Previous to that, we only had I believe, just a complaint investigation label. Now, again, for the emergency response one, you would not load any type of checklist. Just fill out in a summary comment. You could attach pictures as a PDF. You could attach your notes and as a Word document or something like that to the action. Another thing that the data team has done, we do a compliance inspection, and I'm going to load a checklist for this one. Oh yeah, let's see. Today is 419 / okay. Bear with me. As an actual, yes. And I'm going to load the checklist. Yes. For the checklist I'm going to load is the base checklist. And in that base checklist, one of the things that's been causing a lot of issues and problems is questions 19 through 19.17. One of the first things you'll see in the drop-down menu is that we have changed compliant to compliance /yes, so that hopefully it's a little easier to understand. We've also taken out the X partial and the X complete. For questions 19.1 through 19.16, we ask that you only fill those out once when you've done the inspection and you've observed that something's been done, and then you would mark it as compliant or yes. And then when you come down to 19.17 and 19.18, again, we would ask that you fill it out. Is it a partial? Whatever they've done out there, such as, say, they've reduced the herd size and closed open lots, and that was, say, a partial fix, then we would just ask you to fill in a partial response as compliant or yes. And I think those are kind of the basic changes on the inspection screen. Richard or Mark, if you're out there, you're on the data team, or Kate, is there anything else on the inspection screen that we want to hit on?
I would say that's all.
Okay. One other thing, as county feedlot office staff, when you do either an assistance inspection, a compliance inspection as we have up currently, construction inspection, at an NPDES site, you are not to load the checklist requirements. Only fill out this top portion of the screen. If you fill out the checklist requirements, it screws with our data as state inspectors, and at this point in time, we have no way to be able to sort that from the inspections that we are required to do for EPA requirements. So do not fill out a checklist for any of the NPDES work that you do, whether that's assistance, compliance, compliance plus level 2s, level 3s, any of that type of work. Okay? I'm going to get out of this. Check in, check it out. Another upgrade that's happened in Delta, for most of you as you're working on registrations, you will see that we've added, tried to clarify some things in the registration screen. So we do have animal holding area to the well, manure storage area to the well. We have changed this from, I believe it used to say manure basin. It is liquid manure storage areas, so that it's more in line with the terminology that we use. The other big change is in the open lot agreement, and there will be a directive forthcoming from I believe MACFO and the FMT, that's going to be asking that you input all your open lot agreement information that you have for sites. We have added some things to be able to answer some questions that we've been asked. Let's see here. So when you're looking at a site, and I gave Sam the guidance document that's been put together, it's kind of a real rough draft at this point. We're working to finalize it, but we've added some things to be able to answer some questions. So previous to this, we just had an MPC inspection, file review, county inspection, county file review. We've added not completed to the interim verification. So as you're going through your OLAs and you have not been to the site, you would put it in as an undetermined. If you've been to the site and determined that an OLA was not needed, you would check that also. So we've added some things, like I said, to be able to answer some questions that are being asked. One other piece that's been repeatedly brought up is shoreland information. Currently, we are working with our computer programmers in St. Paul to basically update our shoreland layer in our GIS that is in Map Tool. And once that becomes operational, what we will be asking county feedlot staff to do is make sure that their points for their feedlots are located on the centroid of the feedlot, and if it is in a shoreland area or in a drinking water management supply area, that we make sure that those are within the boundaries of both shoreland and drinking water management supply areas. So I guess I'll take any questions you guys have as you've been working in here. If there's things you see,
Eve, would you like me to show the document, or no? Did we cover it adequately here?
You know, you can most certainly take it back, Sam, and show the document. We can go through some of the scenarios.
You mentioned the guidance that Mark created?
That's the document I'm talking about, Kate. Yep. Sorry.
So this is what, can you guys see this now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Steve, you're probably more familiar with it than me, but would you like me to scroll and you talk? Or
well,
would you like me to...
It's pretty self-explanatory, Sam. Basically, I asked Mark Ernest, he and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago that as he was working through some sites and some scenarios within Delta for doing the OLAs, he had some questions. And so I asked him to put a series of screenshots together with a brief description of what they meant. So basically, as we work through this, if you had a site that had a signed open lot agreement and it was in compliance the first time you inspected it, so no improvements were needed, in the final verification, you would put an OLA is not needed. Sam, if you want to take through it, that's fine. And go through it.
Okay.
And we did that for every possible scenario that we could think of, or Mark did, I guess. Like I said, with a brief description as to what each one meant.
Okay. Well, we probably don't have to go through each one of these, but this one will be available soon for folks, Steve?
Yep.
Okay.
Just
So
wanted to get it out there and share it, that we are going to be asking that as you do your registration updates, you also get the OLA information into Delta, and the DWSMA information, or not DWSMA, but getting your shoreland information updated.
Okay. We did have a question saying, so when are all these new things we have to double check coming out since they just went through 200 registrations? She said it would be nice to have all the information at the start of the new year. Well, I guess, it takes time to program, and that's what a lot of this stuff is based off of. So they have to make the changes.
The open lot agreement information is currently available. It has been. We've just added a couple extra answers to make it easier to answer some questions that we've been asked. The shoreland information, you can go through, county feedlot staff can go through their information and update as they're doing their registrations currently. Again, so that's nothing new. The drinking water management supply area will take some time to get that all synced and functional, but that should be limited to, not every site within the county is going to fall into a drinking water management supply area. So the amount of work for those should be much less.
Okay. Well, are there any other questions that you guys might have about Delta that you'd like to ask right now?
Sam, I have a question, a scenario that came up this week. I have a large turkey producer who sold his manure to a crop farmer. The crop farmer did, he got a big end dump or whatever, and so he came to the farm, got it, stockpiled it on the edge of his field. I got some water quality concerns on the stockpile location. How would I enter that complaint? I mean, is the producer, the complaint is
the inspection or the complaint?
The field. Well, it was a complaint and the stockpile was in the wrong spot, but the farmer had nothing to do with it. So it's a crop field owned by a crop farmer, so they're nowhere in the system, and I'm not sure how to enter that complaint into Delta.
Your complaint inspection.
Yeah.
So what I
was a large producer, and so okay, it's not an inspection of the site because he did nothing wrong, but it's over 300 animal units.
Farmer.
Yeah, and so
it's the crop farmer who's responsible for the manure.
Yeah, he's got to keep records and all that kind of stuff, and so I wasn't sure even what kind of category that fits under. If it's, more work than it's worth to try and document.
Yeah, for me, I keep a separate file for those sort of responses, and those don't necessarily get entered into Delta for myself because I don't want to create a registration for a site that isn't required to be registered. And so a lot of times I'll keep a separate file for responses at sites that were not required to register by each year. So 2013, 2012, so on and so forth.
Okay, so it's not a thing I put in Delta. I would just keep that for my complaint count at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, I mean, because you did do an inspection, so you can keep documentation that you did an inspection, you sent a letter. It's I don't know, Steve, if you have an opinion on this, but it's not something that I would create a registration or a number in Delta for.
It's something that we as a program are struggling with. I would agree with you, Sam, that we probably would not create a registration number to put it into Delta. It would count as a level 3 inspection, land app inspection. It'll be something that Tracy, if you followed up on a complaint and you did a level 3,
well, at this point, it's a stockpile. It's not level 3. I mean, they stockpiled it on Friday.
Well, a level 3 is part of a stockpile. A stockpile is part of a level 3. If they stockpiled in the wrong place, you're looking at setbacks and those types of things. So you could complete a level 3, do a complaint inspection, whichever, and count it that way. At the end of the year, you're going to, like Sam said, just keep track of it on your own.
Oh, okay. So you count it as a level 3. I guess I couldn't even figure out where to do it. I'm like, oh, not good.
So there's another question that just came in that I have a feeling some other folks are probably thinking about too. And updating the OLA information, he's been waiting on some, and with some sites he's filled out the information in Delta already. With these new options, should he go back and update what he's already filled out?
If it makes more sense. I mean, if the answers make more sense to go back and do it.
Okay.
That would be my take. I mean, because we had limited choices before in the OLA drop-down menu. And as we met as a data team, we explored how we were going to be able to answer those questions. And by adding a couple extra drop-down fields, we can basically accomplish what we were being asked.
Okay. Well, this is your last call for questions.
Say?
Yeah.
Crazy talking about that manure stockpile and stuff, and that's one of the things I think that we've always had a problem with. So many times we have complaints and this and that, we really don't have any place to put them. You know, because they're not affiliated with the feedlot. Correct?
It's not his problem that the guy was an idiot.
It's one of the downfalls with Delta, Jerry.
Yeah, but it creates a lot of problems because we get a lot of complaints that are nothing and this and that. Would it be simpler if we just put them in this complaint tracker that we have, or you go onto our website and anybody can enter a complaint, even if it's yourself, and then solve the crime.
Would those get to county staff though, or do those just go to state staff?
County staff. You can send them anywhere you want, I believe.
No, they come into us, Jerry.
Yeah, they come into us, but then
we would have to physically refer them.
Yeah. But and I'm not sure, who they would go to. I don't know if it goes to the emergency response, once those complaint things come in.
No, when you do those, if they're assigned to a particular staff, then that particular staff has to handle them. So just for instance, Jerry,
I know.
If a complaint comes in on a stockpile in a county that you're dealing with, say, Candy, Ojai, for instance, it would come to you. You would have to physically then reassign it to Russ in Candy, Ojai, and then the county feedlot staff have no access other than to look at the information that's in there or to input any information.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, everybody's got access to the complaint file system. I mean, if it's a matter of
they have access to being able to put it.
I can make the complaint, but then if you come back to me and I don't want to make a federal case out of it, it's not the end of the world. It's just not in a good spot, and it stinks.
Well, but I mean, the situation would that be a way of documenting it? Documenting the complaint.
Well, I can do it on paper too. That works for me.
Yeah.
The data team's meeting in another month again, Jerry. I'll bring it up at that point.
Yeah.
At the end of next month.
Yeah, but we have the same problem too, because mostly what we work with dozens and dozens of manure brokers, and so it's not the feedlot's manure anymore, and it's not the farmer's manure, and and I think Tracy's probably got a two-edged question. Is number one is there a violation setback wise from waters, and if it isn't, then don't worry about it. Your zoning ordinance, it doesn't have anything in it. You're SOL anyway. And then number two is who's the responsible party? And we end up with this all the time. We got the feedlot who sold the manure to a broker, and the broker who dumped the manure onto the farmer's field. And the bottom line of it is, when it hits the ground, the feedlot owner is responsible for that manure until he loads it on the truck. Once it's loaded on the truck, the trucker's got it. And then at what point does that trucker lose control when he I just had this issue on Monday, and they picked the whole stockpile up and moved it, and it was a broker, and but I mean I think we should get a clear picture on that. So blue with rain, oh my gosh, hey, somebody's on drugs. Oh, anyway, but yeah, we got to get a clear answer on that.
Definitely. Well, it's 11:29, and we're scheduled to end at 11:30. So I think I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and say thank you for attending our WebEx today. And again, this will be posted on the training page website if you would like to rewatch it or come back to a later date. Thank you.
Thanks.